Vietnam's jungle did not simply conceal enemy fighters. It functioned as an active, hostile environment filled with some of the most dangerous wildlife on Earth. For American soldiers deployed there, survival meant far more than avoiding ambushes or landmines. It meant navigating an ecosystem that inflicted real casualties, documented in military medical records and veteran reports throughout the war. This is not a collection of exaggerations or campfire stories. These threats appear repeatedly in after-action reports, field medical logs, and first-hand memoirs. During certain periods and in specific units, wildlife-related injuries and deaths rivaled or even exceeded those caused by direct enemy contact. For veterans, these dangers are already familiar. For everyone else, they represent a side of the Vietnam War that rarely appears in films or textbooks. The jungle environment itself amplified every threat. Dense vegetation limited visibility to a few feet. Heat and humidity pushed the human body to its limits. Constant moisture, rotted boots, uniforms, and skin alike. Soldiers moved through terrain where every step, every handhold, and every moment of rest carried risk. Wildlife did not announce its presence. It did not follow predictable patterns, and it was entirely indifferent to uniforms, weapons, or rank. Among the most feared creatures were the large predators that still roamed Vietnam's jungles during the 1960s and early 1970s. Indo-Chinese tigers had not yet been pushed to the margins of extinction. Adult males could weigh more than 400 pounds and stretch nearly 9 feet in length. These animals were not common, but they did not need to be. Their presence alone was enough to alter behavior and heighten fear. Tigers are ambush predators. They attack silently, often from behind, targeting the neck or skull. A soldier standing guard at night, positioned at the edge of a perimeter, or walking at the rear of a patrol was especially vulnerable. There were documented incidents in which tigers attacked listening posts in isolated positions. In one well-recorded case from Marine Corps records, a nighttime outpost was assaulted by a large cat. The Marines heard screaming and rushed toward the sound, only to find one man dead with catastrophic injuries to the head and neck. Tracks confirmed the attacker was a tiger. Gunfire did little to restore confidence. The animal vanished back into the jungle, leaving the unit to fortify its position against a threat that could not be tracked, negotiated with, or deterred. The psychological effect of knowing such predators existed nearby was profound. Soldiers reported hearing the low, sawing roar of tigers in the distance. That sound, echoing through darkness already thick with tension, created a primal fear layered on top of the constant threat of enemy sappers. Fire support bases near jungle edges accounted for tigers in their defensive planning. Guards were not just scanning for movement from human adversaries. They were watching for predators capable of killing silently and dragging away a fully grown man without warning. Wild boars presented a different kind of danger. These were not domesticated animals or small feral pigs. Vietnamese wild boars were large, aggressive, and territorial. Some weighed more than 300 pounds and possessed long razor-sharp tusks capable of disemboweling a human. Encounters often happened suddenly. A patrol moving through dense undergrowth could stumble into a boar's territory without realizing it. An enraged boar would charge immediately. The tusks could sever major blood vessels, rip open legs or abdomens, and cause fatal bleeding in minutes. Medical evacuations for boar attacks were not common, but they were frequent enough to appear in unit medical records. Night operations magnified this threat. Boars are primarily nocturnal. Units establishing ambush sites or listening posts in the dark, sometimes unknowingly positioned themselves directly in a boar's path. When the animal moved through, soldiers faced impossible decisions. Firing risked revealing their position to enemy forces. Remaining silent meant hoping the boar would pass without attacking. Several documented incidents describe boars charging into defensive perimeters at night, triggering gunfire from startled troops who believed they were under enemy attack. The resulting chaos compromised security and sometimes alerted actual enemy units nearby. Mountainous regions and dense forests. Soldiers encountered aggressive primates collectively referred to as rock apes. This term likely encompassed several species, including macaques, but reports sometimes described animals larger than any known species in the area. These primates traveled in groups, were highly territorial, and displayed coordinated aggressive behavior. Units reported being pelted with rocks and branches dropped from the canopy. A rock falling from 50 feet could cause serious or fatal head trauma. More troubling were incidents in which apes entered base camps, raided food supplies, destroyed equipment, and confronted isolated soldiers. Primates possess tremendous strength relative to their size. Even medium-sized species are several times stronger than humans pound for pound. Archives at institutions such as Texas Tech University contain multiple accounts from soldiers who reported encounters with unusually large ape-like creatures in remote regions. Whether these were misidentified animals, exaggerations under stress, or something else entirely remains unclear. What is documented is that aggressive primates caused injuries, disrupted operations, and added to the pervasive sense that the jungle itself was hostile and unpredictable. Vietnam's waterways presented another lethal environment. Estuarine crocodiles inhabited rivers, canals, and coastal waters. These reptiles are the largest living crocodilian species, capable of exceeding 20 feet in length and weighing over a ton. For riverine units operating boats and conducting patrols, crocodiles were a constant concern. These animals are ambush predators that attack from the water's edge or from below the surface. Murky water made detection nearly impossible. Anyone who fell overboard, reached into the water, or lingered near riverbanks was at risk. Operational records from the Brown Water Navy include references to crocodile encounters that resulted in injuries or near fatalities. One incident: a crocodile lunged at a patrol boat and nearly pulled a crew member into the water before others drove it off with gunfire. Medical records confirm several crocodile attacks on American personnel. The injuries were catastrophic. Crocodiles possess bite forces exceeding 3,000 pounds per square inch. Survivors often lost limbs or died from blood loss and trauma before evacuation could occur. Some units fired into the water before river crossings in hopes of scaring crocodiles away, a practice that illustrates the constant fear these animals generated. Venomous snakes represented one of the most persistent and deadly threats. Vietnam was home to numerous dangerous species, including bamboo pit vipers, cobras, and krites. Snake bites occurred almost daily across American forces during certain periods. Some units reported multiple bites per week. Krites, in particular, were especially feared. Both the banded krite and the Malayan krite were nocturnal, meaning they were most active during night operations. Their venom is neurotoxic and among the most potent of any snake. It causes progressive paralysis, beginning with the extremities and moving toward the respiratory system. Victims often remained conscious while losing the ability to move or breathe. Without antivenom and respiratory support, death was likely. What made krite bites especially dangerous was that they were often painless at first. Soldiers could be bitten while sleeping or during night patrols and not realize it until numbness and weakness appeared hours later. By then, the venom had already spread throughout the body. Field medical units frequently lacked the equipment necessary to manage respiratory failure caused by neurotoxic envenomation. Evacuation was urgent but not always possible in active combat zones. Several documented cases involve soldiers bitten while sleeping in defensive positions, waking up to paralysis spreading through the body, unable to move or call for help. Represented one of the most terrifying scenarios imaginable. Large centipedes added another layer of misery. Vietnamese centipedes could exceed 12 inches in length, with some specimens reaching 14 inches. They were venomous, aggressive, and capable of delivering extremely painful bites. Medics described the pain as comparable to or worse than many combat injuries. Swelling could be severe, sometimes doubling the size of the affected limb. The pain often lasted for days. Infections were common due to the unsanitary jungle environment. These centipedes crawled into boots, sleeping bags, packs, and clothing. Soldiers learned to shake out everything before use, but even vigilance could fail. During night operations, soldiers lying motionless in ambush positions sometimes felt something crawling across their skin but could not use lights to identify it. When that something turned out to be a foot-long centipede, the resulting bite could compromise an entire mission. Medical evacuation for centipede bites was rare. Helicopters were reserved for life-threatening injuries. Soldiers often continued missions while enduring intense pain and swelling. Some bites became infected days later, eventually requiring evacuation once the infection had progressed. Large spiders were another constant presence. Vietnam's jungles contained multiple species of sizable venomous spiders. While most were not lethal to healthy adults, their bites caused significant pain, swelling, and complications. The psychological impact was often worse than the medical effects. Soldiers moving through dense vegetation frequently emerged covered in spiders. Not one or two, but dozens. Spiders dropping from overhead foliage was common and never ceased to be disturbing. Finding spiders in sleeping areas, clothing, and equipment was routine. Infections from spider bites occurred frequently due to contaminated conditions, sometimes requiring antibiotics or evacuation. Leeches were everywhere. After any movement through wet terrain, soldiers found their bodies covered with them. Leeches were not deadly in themselves, but they carried diseases, caused persistent bleeding, and created wounds prone to infection. Improper removal could leave mouthparts embedded in the skin, increasing the risk of complications. The psychological impact was severe. Soldiers described feeling violated, as though the jungle was consuming them. Units conducted regular leech checks, burning or salting them off each other's bodies. In rare cases, soldiers covered in leeches for extended periods during long-range patrols suffered significant blood loss and anemia. Mosquitoes represented one of the most devastating threats of all. They transmitted malaria, dengue fever, and Japanese encephalitis. These diseases incapacitated or killed thousands of American soldiers. Military malaria statistics alone record more than 80,000 confirmed cases, with the true number likely much higher. Soldiers could be healthy one day and delirious with fever the next. Dengue fever caused intense joint and muscle pain that left men unable to function. There was no cure. only symptom management. Anti-malarial medications caused severe side effects, leading some soldiers to stop taking them. That decision sometimes proved fatal. All of these threats combined to create a constant biological assault. Enemy forces could sometimes be avoided with good tactics and alertness. Booby traps could occasionally be detected. Wildlife, disease, and parasites were unavoidable. They were everywhere, unpredictable, and relentless. These dangers appear repeatedly in casualty reports, medical logs, and veteran memoirs. Tigers, crocodiles, venomous snakes, disease-carrying insects, and parasitic infestations added to every burden soldiers carried. Understanding these threats helps explain why Vietnam was so psychologically exhausting. Soldiers could never fully relax, even in supposedly secure areas. The jungle itself was hostile, requiring constant vigilance against dangers ranging from microscopic pathogens to 400-pound predators. Vietnam was not just a war zone, it was an environment that actively fought back. And for many American soldiers, surviving the wildlife was as challenging as surviving the war itself.